So welcome to the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy for optimal living training, basically for mentors and for therapists. But this is just as appropriate, obviously, for people who want to educate themselves out there who are experiencing alcoholism at the moment. So here we go. And just to start, let's have a look at what is the significance. Why have I entitled this philosophy Alcoholic to Alchemist? Well, basically, as many of you know, the word alchemist is an ancient term used for people who used to transform base metals into gold. Obviously, that's not our objective, although it would be quite nice if we could do it. Our objective, in contemporary terms, when we use the term alchemist, it's used to denote the transformation, if you like, of our mental and emotional debris, the negativity in our mind, to transform it into positivity. So what we're doing, we're transforming our mental and emotional turmoil, our mental and emotional baggage, into our psychological wealth. That's what this philosophy is all about. And it's been tried and tested, obviously, not just by myself, but we base this on a group of people really who've been sober at least 5 years, but we've carefully selected these people in that they haven't just been dry for 5 years, they've radically transformed their lives. And there's 200 to 300 people have used a very similar philosophy to find their optimal potential and to find out those things they value in life. And also to find out the purpose in life, which is very important. So the term alchemist for us, from alcoholic to alchemist, is going to denote that transformation. It's going to denote transforming our mental and emotional baggage into our psychological wealth. There we go. There's a little picture of an alchemist there, you can see. And that is the ancient practice of base metals into gold. And like we've just said, now we're talking about transforming. It's really of the mind. This is alchemy of the mind. I term this the archetypal alchemist, which denotes, if you like, an object in our mind that's capable of transforming negativity into positivity. There we go. So what's this philosophy about? You know, what's the 12 steps philosophy for optimal living? What is it about? What are the goals? First and foremost. So what are we going to do in the forthcoming months? Well, let's see. First of all, we're going to challenge current dogma. And what does that mean? We're going to look at that in a second. But basically, people adhere to terms such as I'm an alcoholic, I've got a disease, I've got an illness, I genetically inherited my alcoholism. And what we're going to do, we're going to dispute them philosophy. We're going to dispute them as determinants for alcoholism. We're not saying per se that they have no influence. On the contrary, some of them do have an influence. What we're saying is that they're not determinants of alcoholism. And we'll explain a little bit, we'll explain that a bit better and a bit deeper shortly. Then we're saying, then what we're going to do is explore alternative belief systems. Okay, we're saying that alcoholism isn't an illness. We're saying it's not a disease. We're saying it's not determined by genetic inheritance. But we've said what we've declared what alcoholism isn't. What we really want to find out is what is it? And we'll have a look at that shortly. One of the main goals of this philosophy in all walks of life, if we live life robotically, unconsciously, we're going to severely limit our potential. If we have great self-awareness, we're going to open our options up. In fact, we're going to become pure potential. So this is about increasing self-awareness, one of our goals. Another goal is to identify, process and release our unresolved issues. Okay, many people drink as a way of escaping problems that they've got in life. And really, all that alcohol does is mask the problems, temporary. It certainly doesn't resolve them. And the only way really to resolve unresolved issues is to face them, is to process them and release them. So first of all, before we do that, obviously we have to identify them. You people as therapists in this room today will be quite conversant with working with people with unresolved issues. So the people watching the DVD will be educated to a certain degree in how to resolve their issues, and also obviously they can come to you people to enable them through the passage, that part of this philosophy where they're dealing with unresolved issues. Quite often it's best go to a professional to do that. Okay. The philosophy also wants to educate people. Educate them as to the things that keep them stuck in life. Educate them as to their options. Educate them as to the mechanisms of the mind. What is it that propels us forward? What is it that keeps us stuck? So there's lots of aspects of the philosophy which will educate people. We also want to motivate people. I mean, ultimately motivation must come from within, but we can help people by opening up their options, and showing them direction. We can motivate and inspire people. I will add that there's certain people that I know that have used this philosophy in life that I was actually in rehab with, that are basically millionaires today. You know, they've applied, and they're not unhappy millionaires, whereas that they've just been driven by money. They've been driven by purpose, and you know, one of the aspects of, one of the advantages of that is that they've accumulated wealth as well. But this philosophy, first and foremost, is about psychological wealth. It's about reaching our optimal potential, becoming clear of where we want to go in life. We do that first and foremost by eliciting our values. What is it that we truly value in life? Most people that are experiencing destructive drinking have lost touch with them things that they value in life. So what we want to help them do basically is identify them values. What really inspires them in life? What drives them? If money and other ties weren't any object, what would they be doing? What would they do with their lives? So we're going to look at that as well. And also set new goals and help them, enable them to move towards their optimal potential. So they're the goals of the 12-step philosophy. Has anybody got any questions on them? No? Good. Okay. Just have a little mouthful of tea. So now we come to the first step. Now you can see here the first step is admit having developed a destructive alcohol habit as a consequence of attempting to escape the curriculum of life. Okay, once again, people don't just wake up on a beautiful day, throw the patio doors open and say, it's a beautiful day, I think I'll drink myself to death. It doesn't happen like that. People drink for a reason, and we're going to look at that reason. And what we're saying here, I've chosen the words very carefully for step one, is that we're saying that people drink as a mechanism of escape. They drink to escape certain circumstances in life. And we'll look at that in more depth later on as to how alcohol impacts on us physically to enable us to forget things, to enable us to not care. We'll look at that a little later on. Okay, first of all, what we want to do is look at the myths surrounding alcoholism. And let's start by looking at this one. Alcoholism is a psychiatric illness or a disease. This to me, first and foremost, I understand why people use this terminology. When I was drinking, I'd done things in life that I wasn't proud of. And when I come out of the blackout, when I come out of that alcoholic memory lapse and realised what I was done, I hated myself. I was remorseful, and I know people watching this DVD out there will identify with that. And so I despised myself, and I thought I was a bad person. And then one day somebody come up to me and said, you're not a bad person trying to become good. You're a sick person trying to become better. So in that moment, I instantly felt better about myself. So, although I'm refuting these beliefs that alcoholism is an illness, for reasons I'll go into in a moment, it does have beneficial aspects, and that really is to relieve guilt. You know, lots of people will identify up there with hating themselves, despising themselves because of things that they do when they can't remember in alcoholism. You know, people act very much out of character when they're drunk. They do things they're not proud of, then they feel guilty. But when somebody uses that short phrase, you know, you're not a bad person trying to become good, you're a sick person trying to become better, it really helps initially. Saying that, I do not advocate using the illness and the disease model, simply because when we tell ourselves on a daily basis we are ill or we are diseased, then we're limiting our options once again. We're saying we're not capable of reaching our optimal potential. And also we're attributing alcoholism to a force that's out of our control. And the alcohol to alchemist philosophy for optimal living is all about empowerment. We don't want anything that's out of our control. And ultimately, there isn't anything that's out of our control. There's always a response for every given circumstance. There's alternatives, there's options. So let's move on to the second myth. An alcoholic personality predisposes a person to drink. Okay. Again, you will hear people saying, oh, I've got an addictive personality. And it's a cop-out, really. I've used that many times in my own life, you know, so I'm not being a hypocrite here. I'd like to make that very clear that these things I've said, you know, alcoholism is an illness, is a disease, it's a personality disorder. And ultimately it's not, because what we're saying is that if somebody who's got a shopping addiction or somebody who's got an eating habit, if we say, oh, I've got an addictive personality, it's just an excuse to do what we want. It's just an excuse to exercise lack of control. You know, if I go in the fridge now and eat everything in the fridge and my weight goes up 2 stone and somebody comes to me and says, you know, you put on some weight, you look awful, and you say, yeah, I've got an addictive personality, it's out of my control, I'll eat the next fridge load when it comes in, basically. It's the same with alcoholism. You know, if I say I've got an addictive personality, what's that saying is that I can't stop drinking, you know, my life's cut out, I'm going to die. I've been to so many funerals of people I've been close to over the years, so I'm not just talking about successful people, this philosophy. It got that bad at one point that I stopped going to funerals because I just never had the time to go to all of them, quite frankly. Of people who adhere to these beliefs, you know, I've got an addictive person. What does that mean? It means nothing, quite frankly, but people don't think about the phraseology they're using. It's a cop-out, you know. I drink excessively. My life is full of destruction. I leave a trail of devastation wherever I go because I have got an addictive personality. That's a load of rubbish, literally. So for those people again watching this DVD, if you do adopt these belief systems, please revise them. If you want to reach your optimal potential, if you want to turn your life around, please revise your belief systems. Next one. Okay, genetic heritage causes alcoholism. Okay, we can't dispute the evidence for this. Genetic heritage can influence us. It can, in a sense, predispose us to heavy drinking. But then there's so many people who drink heavily that haven't got relatives, parents, grandparents who drink at all. And vice versa, there's so many parents that drink very, very heavily whose children don't drink at all or drink normally, that one thing we can say without, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is that genetic heritage doesn't determine whether a person will be an alcoholic or not. Ultimately, the choice is still down to them. It may give them a propensity to drink heavier than other people, but then they still have got a choice. So let's say they may be initially programmed to drink heavier than other people, but they can stop that, they can override it. Ultimately, we are in charge and we can stop that. And the evidence shows that most parents with alcoholism don't have children with alcoholism, and vice versa, which again refutes the idea that genetic heritage is a determinant, in other words, determines alcoholism. That means, there's no argument. If you've got a parent who drinks, you're going to drink. That's nonsense as well. And we know many and many people who've been through this philosophy, who've had parents who drink heavily, obviously have got the genetics, but they've turned their life around. So let's not adhere to the belief that, or let's not use the excuse, I drink because I've got the genes, because it's not correct. Alcoholism is learned behaviour. Again, the influence of our childhood is very, very powerful. And if we see people, significant others drinking and drinking and drinking, the chances are we may start drinking like them. But equally, there's a lot of people use that as motivation not to drink. A lot of people saying, I don't want to be like them, and end up not drinking. So again, childhood influence, this learned behaviour that we've learned here from significant others, is not a determinant. It may play a part, undoubtedly. It may play a part. But what we're saying here is that if we adhere to any of these beliefs, we disempower ourselves. We say that there's a force outside of ourselves that's impacting on us, and which we have no control over, that causes us to drink destructively. That is nonsense. That really is nonsense. So I've put here, the statements above suggest that a force beyond our control is compelling us to drink. This leads to the belief that we have no choice. And again, if we revisit them, alcohol is a psychiatric illness or disease. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to say imbibing alcohol is a disease or illness, constitutes a disease or illness. It may be that the things giving rise to destructive drinking, the underlying issues, can be illness, and we can deal with them, as therapists or mentors, we can deal with them. We have the tools to deal with them. But alcoholism per se, no, not an illness, not a disease. Again, personality disorder, this unfathomable personality disorder, where is it? Again, it's an excuse. And we must move away from all of these excuses. Okay, so let us move on. So if we're saying alcoholism isn't a disease, if we're saying alcoholism isn't an illness, or that genetic inheritance doesn't determine alcoholism, we're saying what alcoholism isn't. So what is it? It's obviously some sort of powerful force. People lose their life for it. People lose their friends, the jobs, everything they have, the dignity. So, it must be something. What is it? So, first of all, just before we do that, let's just quickly look at the terms alcoholic and alcoholism as well. We'll look at exactly what alcoholism is in a second. First of all, alcoholic and alcoholism, what do the terms mean? Firstly, alcoholism is not a thing. It's not something you can grasp hold of. It's not a name you can pin on yourself. Alcoholism is a process. Okay. Let's just leave it at that and move on. So, to label ourselves alcoholic is both misleading and it's self-defeating. What we're doing here, we're taking the process of alcoholism and we're making it into what's called a nominalization, a name. So a process is a transient thing. It's something that we can experience and come through. But when we make it into a nominalisation, i.e. we go from alcoholism, a process, to an alcoholic, I am an alcoholic, which is a name I'm pinning to myself, I'm giving very deceptive messages to my brain. What I'm saying is that I am not capable of my optimal potential because I am an alcoholic. Okay. Ultimately, what I am is a person who's experiencing alcoholism. Now that's totally different. The message I give to my brain when I say first and foremost, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a person, but I'm experiencing alcoholism. What I'm saying to my brain is that it's a transient process of alcoholism. If I want to alleviate it, if I want to resolve my alcoholism, then I can, because it's a process I'm going through. It's not what I am. When I say I am an alcoholic, I'm defining the whole of my personality in detrimental terms, in derogatory terms. And that is going to give my brain messages of deficit. I am not capable. I am an alcoholic. Again, you know, we know why people use that term. People use that term basically to remind themselves that they don't drink. Normally, like maybe, you know, the therapists in this room who drink socially, you could go out and you can drink socially. What an alcoholic is doing by labelling themselves, I am an alcoholic, because I've done this myself for many years, is saying, I can't not drink like you people drink. And the best way to phrase this is to say, when I drink alcohol, I have an abreaction. I react abnormally to alcohol. I react differently from most of the population to alcohol. The reasons for that we look at later on. But for now, when I say I am a person experiencing alcoholism, I'm keeping the whole thing in a process that's transient. I'm sending messages to my brain saying that I can overcome this, I can come through it, I can resolve it. Many people do. Once we start pinning that alcoholic label on us, then we're giving messages to the brain, deceptive messages of stuckness. I am an alcoholic, therefore I am not capable of, you know, of my optimal potential. I'm describing myself to my brain, which will become my thoughts, you know, internalized thoughts, in terms of a deficit. So I do not advocate using the term at all. Sometimes it's convenient to use when we're conversing with people, to use the term alcoholic, and occasionally I'll do it because it's long-winded to say I am a person experiencing alcoholism. But that's how I describe myself today. Although I don't drink today, I know undoubtedly if I was to take a drink now, I would have an abreaction. I know this from personal experience because when I was on my journey, I drank after a month's sobriety, after 2 months, 3 months sobriety. I drank after a year's sobriety. I drank after 2 years sobriety, and I drank after 6.5 years sobriety. And every one of them drinks had the same result. Okay, I dealt with my unresolved issues. So I wasn't trying to escape my unresolved issues. At the point I drank after 6.5 years, I'd become like certain tribes in certain countries where they never had alcohol in their life, and if they take alcohol, it poisons them basically. That's the way I reacted on my last drink after 6.5 years. I didn't have any psychological problems as such from the drink. I had physical problems. I was very, very sick, very ill. And that led, I must admit, that did lead to some psychological turmoil. But I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to carry on drinking. But it proved to me, if I can go 6.5 years of working on myself and making a good life for myself, go back and have a drink and feel like crap, that I'm never going to drink like normal people. So it's very similar to a person with an allergy. For instance, if a person's got an allergy to nuts, they're not going to go into my kitchen. and help themselves to a big bag of nuts because they may well have an anaphylactic shock, which could kill them. And that's the way I view alcoholism. I'm a person experiencing alcoholism, if you like. Now, the alcoholism is dormant because, you know, I'm not drinking. I've been away from drink for a long, long time. But if I should take a drink, just like the person with the nut allergy, I'll be in a sense risking my life. I'm going to react to drink. So let's phrase it that way, and this empowers. I am a person who chooses not to drink because when I drink, I have an abreaction. That abreaction can come in three guises. It can become mental, it can be emotional, and it can be physical. I can be sick, I can feel screwed up emotionally, or I can be in mental turmoil. And it can manifest in any of them ways, really. I don't want to find out, actually. And if we want to feel good, there's many ways of doing that without alcohol. We can produce chemicals in our body that will make us feel far better than alcohol makes us feel, just by the thought process that go through our mind. And we're going to be dealing with that at a later stage. Okay, so to label ourselves alcoholic is both misleading and self-defeating, because it's the messages we're given to our brain on a daily basis. I am an alcoholic, therefore I am incapable of this, that and the other. Whereas if we say, I am a person experiencing alcoholism, and if we know in our mind that when we imbibe alcohol we have an abreaction on one level or another, then if we've got that as a firm platform, that should be, you know, ultimately that should be enough to keep any sensible person away from drink. The problem is we're not capable of being sensible or logical when we're in the throes of alcoholism, which is why we go through this program. Okay, the word alcoholic, like we said before, is a nominalization, which means we take a process, you know, a moving process, and we make it into a static entity. So alcoholism becomes alcoholic. Somebody experiencing depression will become a depressive. Okay, so, and it's very important that, you know, that what we're doing here, we're sending these deceptive messages to the brain. Okay, again, I'm going to reiterate because it's so important. If we say that we're a person experiencing alcoholism, here the word person denotes pure potential, because it's my belief. I've seen people come from the gutter. I've come from the gutter myself, being homeless, being on my deathbed, to where I am today. And that's because I chose to call myself first and foremost not an alcoholic but a person. And when I use person, and a light comes on in my mind and says any person is pure potential. We can achieve anything, and that's been proved time and time again. By changing a process into a static thing, a name, we perceive it as permanent and limits our choices. Okay, just want to move on here. So here we're looking at the words we use now, and a lot of this comes from a practice called neuro-linguistic programming or cognitive behavioural therapy. If I use the term alcoholic, here's what I'm doing. I'm defining the whole of my person in negative terminology. I, meaning the whole of me, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a lot more than an alcoholic. Right. When we use this term, we negatively program our unconscious mind. We lead it into deficit. And that again limits our options. The alternative that we suggest is to say I am a person experiencing alcoholism. I'll say that again, alcoholism. Okay, what does this do? We describe alcoholism, when we use the term alcoholism, we're talking about a transient process. Anything that transient can pass. Anything that's static is going to stay with you. Alcoholic is going to stay with you. Alcoholism is a transient process you can experience and move through. Saying this, one disclaimer is that we must always bear in mind that we have the underlying foundation that we're extremely aware that if we imbibe alcohol, that we're going to abreact. So we don't advocate drink whatsoever. This philosophy really promotes abstinence from drink. And that's been done through people's experience. And so we haven't known anybody there's been people who drank after 20 years and longer, and they've had the same abreaction as they would have done when they were drinking years before. So it doesn't go away. But one thing I can say on a positive note is that we don't need drink to make us feel happy. Unlimited possibilities. When we use that, I am a person experiencing alcoholism, we have unlimited possibilities. We're given very positive messages to our brain. Okay, so I said before, what exactly is alcoholism then? If it's not this illness, disease and genetically inherited, what is it? Okay, from all the people that we've studied, there's been one common theme. It wasn't illness, it wasn't disease, it wasn't learned behaviour, it wasn't genetic inheritance, it was escapism. In every instance we spoke to successful people, they realised that they were trying to escape something in life. And we're going to look exactly at the categories of the things people were trying to escape from shortly. But for now, let's just stay with this escape mechanism. So how does it work? So we've got a problem in life. Let's say that I just had a breakup with my girlfriend and I can't bear the emotions I'm feeling at the moment. Or let's say that I've upset somebody badly during a blackout, which is alcoholic amnesia. It's when we drink so much that we can't remember what we were doing. So let's say we've upset somebody very badly, made fools of ourselves, been locked up, whatever it was. How does alcoholism enable us to escape that? Let's see. Right. First and foremost, alcohol affects the frontal lobes of the brain. And the frontal lobes of the brain, amongst other things, deal with our inhibitions. Right. What alcohol does is it represses the centre that deals with the inhibitions. So we become uninhibited. Now, does anybody know what another phrase for uninhibited would be?
Carefree.
Carefree, exactly. We don't care. So, let's say another thing as well. Freud said, the eminent psychiatrist Freud, said that we are a species, a pleasure-seeking species. And again, this has proved to be true. Human beings will take the path of least resistance from discomfort to comfort, from displeasure to pleasure. Now, we've got a problem in life. We imbibe alcohol, and alcohol hits the front lobes of our brain. The problem, all of a sudden, we don't care about it. Because alcohol has affected the frontal lobes of our brain that deal with our inhibitions. It's repressed our inhibitions, which has the outcome of making us feel carefree. So all of a sudden we think, oh God, I felt like shit, excuse the language, just before. All of a sudden I don't care. The other thing alcohol does is it affects our memory, distorts our memory. So not only don't we care, but we can't remember properly. The more alcohol we consume, we don't remember. So this is like a magical panacea. Bear in mind, we are a species that want to move from displeasure to pleasure with the least possible resistance. So we're not actually solving our problems. What we do when we drink, we mask the problem. That's very important. Okay, so we've had a big arguments with somebody, our lives, we're worried, we're full of fear, we're full of guilt. We take a drink. All of a sudden we don't care. We're carefree. Alcohol's hit the frontal lobes. We found the magical panacea for all our problems in life. And it was that belief system that led me to my deathbed, led me to being homeless, led to all of my friends and family, more or less at times, you know, having to distance themselves from me. Took everything, including my dignity, away, till I ended up on the rat-infested railway embankment. My belief that alcohol is the magical panacea for all life's problems. And can I explain another thing here, that when we talk about alcoholism, this is another thing. The word ism means a set of beliefs appertaining to whatever precedes it. So alcoholism is a set of beliefs appertaining to alcohol. The belief that, for me, my beliefs were, the ism, if you like, was alcohol is the magical panacea for all life's problems. It will alleviate and resolve all life's problems. So now what we're realising here is that actually alcoholism is not in a bottle. It's not the drink. It's the polluted mind. It's the set of beliefs, if you like, that surround alcohol that become the real problem. My belief that alcohol was going to cure all my problems in life was the start of my downfall, was the start of my decline. And that's what we're talking about with alcoholism. A set of beliefs appertaining to alcohol. And most people's beliefs who drink destructively are in error. You know, because alcohol doesn't alleviate problems, which we're going to see. But bear in mind that when we drink, initially we don't care and we forget. What a fantastic way of getting rid of our problems. That's why alcohol is so seductive in the early days. We have a problem, we drink, we don't care, we forget. Problem solved. No, believe me. That's why it's seductive. That's why that starts the snowballing of drinking heavier and heavier and heavier. So alcohol affects our memory, and it gives us loss or impairment of memory. So here we've got I've just put here, if we take a look at the slide, and we've got a problem arises. We drink. We don't care, or we can't remember properly. We feel liberated. Is that fair enough? Mm-hmm. Is that logical? And that's exactly, every time I had a problem, I had terrible low self-esteem, I might have upset people when I was drinking and whatever. The first thing I wanted when all of the weight of them problems were on my shoulders was to not care and to forget. And alcohol done the job perfectly. Okay? Very seductive. Moving on. So, we've said this before, Freud said it, we are pleasure-seeking species. We will take the path of least resistance to pleasure. Why go through all the hard work of working through our unresolved issues when we can take some alcohol and we automatically don't care? Okay. We have this magical panacea that can solve all life's problems. You'll notice there we are hooked. Alcohol has played its seductive cards and we fell for it. Here we have a picture, which hopefully I'll show to the people on camera as well, of myself. That is what happened when I used this philosophy. I will put that picture up hopefully on this DVD, but basically with that philosophy in mind, I ended up, like I said before, homeless, jobless, on rat-infested railway embankments in the pouring down rain, on my deathbed, in hospitals, I've lost count how many times, in rehabs, I don't know how many times, and using that philosophy of drink is the magical panacea for life is what got me there. Okay. Alcohol doesn't solve our problems, it masks them. Okay, if we've got unresolved problems that we permanently mask, in other words, we permanently push down into our unconscious mind, okay, what's going to happen eventually? Unresolved problems are energy. Energy is neither created or destroyed. It must find expression. And what generally happens when we keep repressing our problems is that it eventually finds expression in ways that are very detrimental to our life. Mood swings, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and so on. That's what we're going to get ultimately. So here we've got, when the effects of alcohol wear off and our memory and inhibitions return, our problems become apparent again. Okay. So we've masked them temporarily, but when the effects of alcohol wear off, they come back again. So what do? We've got this vicious cycle. We run for the bottle again. And not only do our problems come back again, often they're exacerbated through our drinking, because our mind becomes extremely distorted, and we're not now dealing with reality, we're dealing with the distorted and polluted contents of our mind. Okay. When we turn to the bottle to enable us to forget and not care again, but this time it takes a greater quantity of alcohol, so when we return we have to drink more to get the same effect. Again, the vicious cycle has started. The pattern continues until we reach a point of saturation, right? At this point, alcohol stops masking our problems. In fact, what it does, it exacerbates the problem. People say, I crossed that line into alcoholism. We've heard this said time and time again. What exactly do we mean by we crossed that line? That line really is when alcohol stops masking our problems and exacerbates the problems. But we remember only that alcohol alleviated our problems, so we continue to drink and drink and drink, and then we're in deep trouble. So now, thereafter, every time we drink alcohol, we have an abreaction. This is what I want the people out there to adhere to, really, is that, you know, don't label yourself alcoholic, but know that when you drink, you're a person that when you drink, when you imbibe alcohol, you have an abreaction. So what does this mean exactly? You know, where do we go from here? If we have an abreaction, you know, what are we talking about there? Which basically brings us to step 2. So just before we move on to step 2, we're just going to have a short break. Okay, so we were saying that, you know, when we drink we have an abreaction, and people refer to this invisible line. We've crossed this line to describe their demise into alcoholism. Okay, so bringing us to step 2, step 1 said that we drink, basically we've developed an alcohol habit as a consequence of trying to escape the curriculum of life. We've already realised now that alcohol affects the frontal lobes of our brain. And it makes us carefree. So we have a problem, we drink, we don't care. Then there comes a point when we escalate, we have to imbibe more alcohol to get the same results, to enable us to forget and to enable us to be carefree. Then there comes a point of saturation where basically we go into blackouts almost immediately. We have to consume that much alcohol to forget our problems or not care, that it affects our memory immediately and we can't remember what we're doing. That's referred to, that alcoholic amnesia is commonly referred to as a blackout. And in blackouts we do all sorts of things that we regret. People out there will identify, you know, we're remorseful, we regret. And all we want to do is when we come out of the alcohol blackout is drink again to forget the new history, the new destructive history that we've just created. So you can see it's very, very seductive. But there comes this point, and step 2 says having crossed the abreactive threshold, we need to abandon the idea that alcohol provides a means of escape from our problems. And we need to adopt the idea or the belief that the most effective way to escape our problems is to solve them. Okay, so we're going to move on to action. Now this is important, the abreactive threshold, that's a strange one, isn't it? You know, and what I'm saying by that is that most people who drink initially, they don't drink destructively. It takes a while to get there. I got there very early in life, and lots of people like me get there in early life. But initially, they drink somewhat normally. You know, might be heavily, but somewhat normally. But there comes a point when they reach this threshold, whereby there's seemingly no going back. Once people cross this threshold, I've never known anybody, and I'm talking about thousands of people I've met all over the world with alcoholism. I've never known anybody, when they've reached these depths, to reverse it. I've been to many funerals of people who have died trying, but there's such a good life out there without alcoholism, and you can feel it in ways, you know, you can produce chemicals in your body without alcoholism that'll make you feel fantastic, blissful even, which through methods that we'll describe later on. So the abreactive threshold, what are we talking about here? People often say I've crossed the line into alcoholism. What is this invisible line? What are they talking about? It's the point at which alcohol stops concealing problems and exacerbates them. That's what we're talking about. Okay. So prior to reaching the abreactive threshold, alcohol does mask our problems in the ways we described earlier on. It affects the frontal lobes of our brain, it affects our memory. We don't care and we can't remember. Problem solved. Path of least resistance to pleasure. Displeasure alleviated. Problem is, with people like myself, that normally ends up in hospitalisations, no friends, no job, no home, no dignity. And that is an option to anyone. Here with the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy for optimal living, we're not trying to coerce people into a way of being. We're offering a choice. There will ultimately be people out there who don't agree with certain aspects of the philosophy. We're not trying to coerce them into believing that. It's their choice. We just know that this philosophy works for lots of people, and not just alcoholism, in any walk of life. So what we're saying is, prior to the abreactive threshold, alcohol masks our problems. Okay. After crossing the threshold, alcohol emphasises our problems. The feelings of liberation, omnipotence, ecstasy and euphoria that we once got through imbibing alcohol, no more. People go back time and time again chasing them feelings. I was one of them. But they're never going to come anymore. You know, once we can accept, yes, I have crossed the abreactive threshold, therefore, when I imbibe alcohol, from this day forth, I am going to have an abreaction that's going to be deleterious or detrimental to my life. It's going to be life-defeating or self-defeating action if I take. And once we can accept that fully, that's when we move on. And what step 2 is about is simply accepting that, yes, I've reached and I've compromised the abreactive threshold. Therefore, I admit totally that every time, or I'm aware totally, I am that if I drink, I'm going to have an abreaction. That is going to be self-defeating. That's all we've got to say. Okay. Here, what we're saying is that, you know, the phenomenon again is very similar to analogy. If I use what, you know, the example I used before, a person with a nut allergy has to accept fully that if they're to take in nuts, if they're to eat nuts, the chances are they're going to have anaphylactic shock, and that, you know, they're compromising their life. That's all we need to do with step 2, is just recognise that if we want to carry on drinking, although we know we've just got to know that there is no life out there for us. You know, a person with a nut allergy who eats nuts is likely going to die at some point through anaphylactic shock. The same thing with alcoholism. A person who continues to drink, and again I know this through personal experience from many and many and many and many people close to me who have died through alcoholism, they knew that they crossed the abreactive threshold. They knew that they would abreact in one way or another when they drank, but they chose to carry on. And it does become a choice. It doesn't feel like a choice initially, and I'll explain why that is later on. Okay, so really what it's like, in a sense, is prior to the abreactive threshold, if we can envisage a dam, and a dam holds back water. Let's say that alcohol is that dam, and what it does, it holds back all our emotional and mental debris. All our unresolved issues are held back by alcoholism, held back in our unconscious mind so that we're not conscious of them. And if we feel free and liberated. When we compromise the abreactive threshold, what it's like is that dam of alcohol comes down, and the polluted contents of our mind come through from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind with the might of a tsunami. They come through, and all of these issues hit us full on. And then we're in trouble, basically, because alcohol no longer works. We've got all of these issues swimming around in our heads. And many people at that point, obviously, it's severe depression, suicide, and whatever. But there is a path. And there's lots of people out there taking that path. And this program is training people like yourselves and mentors to go out there and train other people, to give them the tools, not just to give up drinking, because that's not enough. A person who just gives up drinking per se will probably revert back to it if they don't do something with their life. We want to give these people the tools to reach their optimal potential. You think of it this way: if alcoholism is a mechanism of escape, right? If we've got nothing, if we've got a life that we adore, we get up of a morning, like I do nearly every morning, and really embrace life, why would I want to escape? And there is a passage in the book that I call Escaping into the Magic, because where I escape to is the creative domain of my mind. And I can do that without alcohol. And I go there umpteen times a day. So we don't need alcohol to escape our problems. And when we resolve our problems, you know, initially we don't have anything we want to escape from. So the first part of the program is about identifying them things from which we seek escape and resolving them. Okay. So if you've got this idea that the abreactive threshold is, if you can envisage alcohol as a dam that's holding back all the contents of our polluted mind out of our conscious mind, we haven't got rid of them. They're there, they're active, they're still impacting on us. Our unconscious mind impacts on us all the time. But when we reach the abreactive threshold, instead of alcoholism keeping back that stuff in our unconscious mind, it collapses and everything comes flooding through to consciousness. And then fears, guilt, everything seems to hit us at once. And first of all, we need to know what we're up against. We need to become aware of the mechanisms that are going on. So this is the abreactive threshold being compromised. Okay, I've just explained the pre-abreactive threshold and the post-abreactive threshold, so I'll just skip them slides. Right, when we do compromise the abreactive threshold and we do cross that line, so to speak, then the contents of our mind work in all strange ways. We become driven by the persecutory tactics of our turbulent minds, and we lose control. We have all of these issues that for years we've suppressed with alcoholism, and all of a sudden they come through to our conscious mind, and we're persecuted. People, again, who've experienced alcoholism will know exactly what I'm talking about. That persecution is horrible, it's relentless, it's 24 hours a day, and basically we have to be extremely strong to not relapse and go back to alcohol. And really, with a lot of people, when the pain gets so great and they fully accept that alcohol isn't the answer to the problem anymore, then that's when people will normally move on. So what we must realise that once we've compromised the abreactive threshold, once we've crossed that invisible line, all subsequent bouts of drinking will end up in abreaction. They'll lead to an abreaction. Abreactions manifest, and again, people watching this will identify severe mood swings, paranoia, intense guilt, remorse, suicidal tendencies. All of these are extremely common. Okay, so it sounds like we're up the creek without a paddle at step 2. We're not. We've just actually, what we've done, we've identified and we've become aware of the mechanisms that are driving our alcoholism. And the first stage in combating anything is to be aware of what's going on within us. Okay, so the conclusion of this. The abreactive threshold is a phenomenon whereby alcohol ceases to contain your mental pollution and it comes flooding from the unconscious to the conscious with the might of a tsunami. Once compromised, there is no reverse engineering. The invisible line has been crossed and you and drink remain incompatible for life. Again, I'm not trying to force that belief onto anybody. What I'm trying to do is to save people out there going out and putting it to task, putting it to test. When we know we abreact to alcohol, to continue drinking is insanity, really. But I was one of them people who wouldn't take the advice of, and I had to put it to task. And I found out the hard way, and I found out years later, after having really successful periods away from drink, to going back to the devastation. So I don't make that statement saying us and alcohol are incompatible for life. I don't make it lightly. I make it through experience of thousands upon thousands of people. Okay, which brings us to step 3. At that point, I think we'll have another short break. Okay, so let's push on. Now, we've said that alcoholism is a mechanism of escape. Okay, so what is it exactly that people want to escape from? Well, we've done lots of research into this and we've identified 4 main categories. Obviously, there's derivatives of these. For instance, you know, we talk about one of the categories being psychological pain, in other words, unresolved issues and whatever. You might say subcategories of psychological pain can be anxiety, depression. So it covers a vast amount of, you know, of ground, really. So step 3 is come to accept that the locus of the problem is a mind infected with, now here's what we call the sobriety saboteurs, the objects in our mind that are there, that are destructive. Okay, fear. And an acronym of fear, quite often used in the circles of alcoholism, is forget everything and run. Actually, there's another derivative of that which begins with F as well, but it's F everything and run. So, you know, and it's quite correct in my belief. So fear, people want to escape their fears. Futility, what does that mean? It means that mine was mainly futility, and it means you want to escape from that feeling that there's no purpose to life, there's no point in life. It's that depressive feeling, really. Guilt is a big one for people, and again, people watching this DVD that are experiencing alcoholism will know all about guilt and remorse. I don't need to say anymore. And pain. When I refer to pain, I'm not referring to, you know, a cut or a broken leg. I'm referring to psychological pain. I'm referring to unresolved issues. Okay. So these are the 4 categories. So we're saying step 3 says, come to accept that the locus of the problem was a mind, or is a mind, infected with fear, futility, guilt and pain, the answer to which is a profound shift in consciousness, a profound shift in thinking. Okay, and don't worry, that might sound a tall order, but the rest of the philosophy is to give you the tools to induce and maintain this shift in thinking. Okay, which as therapists and mentors, we're going to do ourselves as well. We're going to experience this for ourselves. So, okay. On acceptance, step 3, on accepting that alcoholism is a mechanism for escaping what we call the sobriety saboteurs, fear, futility, guilt and psychological pain, then once we've accepted that, that's where the root cause of our destructive drinking comes from, automatically our thinking begins to shift. Okay. Though alcohol severely aggravates existing problems and ultimately creates new ones, we cannot alleviate alcoholism by merely abstaining from drink. This is most important. The problem ultimately is not in the bottle. The problem is our polluted and distorted mind. Okay. I'm not condoning drinking, because we've already identified that when a person experiencing alcoholism drinks, they should know they're going to abreact. But putting that problem down doesn't alleviate the chaos in the mind. Okay? And it's the chaos in the mind that's given rise to their destructive drinking. So by saying, okay, I've finished with drink, and not doing any work on ourselves, ultimately they're going to pick the drink up again. Because the fears, the guilt, the pain, or the feeling of life's not worth living, there's nothing, no purpose to life, they're going to seek escape from them. At some point in the future, they're going to seek escape. And unfortunately, it normally takes a while before people realise that alcohol, even though they've crossed the abreactive threshold, alcohol, they still have this belief that alcohol somehow will sort the problems out. They're still chasing the effect that alcohol had in the early days, which once they've crossed the abreactive threshold, it never does. Even if they take a small minimal amount of alcohol, they'll abreact. It'll throw the mind into turmoil. It'll make them feel physically sick. So that's not an option anymore. So we're stuck with this fear, this guilt, this pain, this futility. Again, I label them the sobriety saboteurs. So what we need to do, we said before that, you know, by imbibing alcohol, we don't escape our problems anymore. We've crossed the abreactive threshold. To escape our problems, the only way to escape our problems is to solve them. Okay? Which is where you people come in. And hopefully in the future, we would like you as trainers going out training people who have actually experienced alcoholism in the mechanisms of this philosophy as well. Okay, the content of our polluted mind is the fundamental problem. Okay, what we're saying here, the real problem is not in the bottle, it's in the mind. So far we have identified that alcoholism isn't an illness or disease. It isn't predetermined by genetic inheritance. It isn't predetermined by learned behaviour. It isn't the result of an addictive personality. We have actually identified that alcoholism, due to its effects on the frontal lobe and on memory, on the frontal lobes and memory, it's a mechanism of escape. Okay. Right. So what we really want to do, when people say I want to get out of my mind, that is, it's very, very practical. Why do they want to get out of the mind? They want to get out of the mind, that's because that's where all the problems lie. But the problem we've hit and we've identified now is alcoholism doesn't work anymore. When we imbibe alcohol, we don't get out of our mind anymore. In fact, we become imprisoned in our mind. That's the difference between pre-abreactive threshold and post-abreactive threshold drinking, is that before we cross that invisible line, we did get out of our mind. We forgot our problems for a while. We didn't care about our problems for a while. But once we're post-abreactive threshold, and once we've crossed that invisible line, Alcohol doesn't provide an escape route anymore. In fact, it makes things a damn sight worse. And we need to really absorb that statement. We need to be aware of that. And ultimately, what step 3 is asking us to do is accept all of these things. It's to accept, you know, the concept that alcoholism isn't an illness, a disease, and so on, learned behaviour and all them things. It's asking us to realise that the reason we seek escape is that we've got unresolved problems in our mind. And it's from these problems that reside in the mind, that we seek escape. And it's also asking us, you know, the first 3 steps are asking us to realise that alcohol isn't going to work anymore. So we have to set about resolving the problems in our mind. So it says here, are we condemned to a life of misery? Or is there an alternative escape route? Okay, again, we've said this many times this morning. The only way to escape our problems, really, is to solve them. Okay, so how do we identify our problems? What exactly are we seeking escape from? Okay, here, I mentioned it before. The 4 main categories that we identified, and there's many subcategories of these, were fear, futility, pain in the psychological sense of pain, and guilt. These are the sobriety saboteurs, and part of living life consciously, which is step 5, is identifying when the sobriety saboteurs are active in our mind. And we're going to do lots of work on them. You see, what I'm giving you at the moment and during this stage of the course is a general synopsis of the philosophy. But what we will do in the future, and we will record hopefully, is that we'll take each part of this and we'll go into depth. And we will really, when we've finished, you will be given the tools, you'll be in possession of the tools to enable people to turn their lives around radically. And that, I do promise you, the proviso there is that the people must want to turn their lives around radically. So the true nature of addiction we're going to look at here. And what is addiction? You know, people talk about addiction, and often people, they feel it's a force that's happening to them, that they have no control over them. I used to feel, the only way I can describe addiction for me is I felt I was possessed by a negative force. I'm not talking about supernatural ghosts, or I'm talking that there was a real destructive force active in my psyche, in my mind, and I felt like I had no control over it. Okay, but when we look at addiction, and we look at the true nature of addiction, actually addiction is something we've taught ourselves to do. Let's look at it. We had problems from which we couldn't bear. Okay, through experimenting with drink, we found out that when we drank, our problems paled into insignificance for a little while because of the effects of alcohol on us. So that we've learned, problem, take a drink. Okay, then what happens? We have to drink more and more and more and more to get the same effect. When this happens, we go into alcoholic blackouts, alcoholic amnesia, and we act in ways that are not conducive to our personality, to our character. We act in odd ways, and when we come out of these blackouts, we feel really guilty, and then we want another drink. We've learned that anytime we feel psychological pain, drink takes it away, pre-abreactive threshold. So we drink again. So we've taught ourselves. So what we're saying here, let's have a look at addiction. Addiction is not something that has been unwittingly thrust upon us. It's not something that's happening to us. That's disempowerment. That is relinquishing control on our behalf. It is not something that, it's not a process by which we've been enslaved. We've not just been unlucky and somebody, you know, we've ended up with this. I'll tell you what it is in a minute, but it's not an illness. It's not a state of powerlessness. Addiction is simply a habit. It's something we've taught ourselves to do. We've seen that. You know, again, I'll reiterate, problem, drink, problem relieved for a while, and problem comes back when the drink, effects of drink wear off, have another drink. We've taught ourselves this process, and what happens is that when we repeat a process over and over and over again, it becomes second nature. It becomes unconscious. So then we have a problem. Before we know it, a drink is in our hand. When a process becomes unconscious, it feels like we're not in control. It feels like there's a force acting upon us. When in reality, we've just taught ourselves to carry out this behaviour so many times, it's automated. And that's called habituated. And the nature of addiction is a habit. So therefore, addiction is a habit that we've taught ourselves to do so well that it's second nature. This is the powerful side of addiction, because we've done it that many times. You know, when you get into your car now, you don't think about driving, really. Your mind might wander off into other things, but you do it automated. You don't have to think about it. That's the same with a person experiencing alcoholism. When they have a problem, they don't think about it. It's happened, the drink's in the hand. And they'll even say to you afterwards, I don't even remember picking that drink up. And then they attribute it to the, you know, oh, that's my illness, you know, that's my genetic inheritance. No, it's not. It's something that you've learned yourself to do. And bear in mind, as a species, we will avoid displeasure at all costs. So there's a logical reason for you taking that drink. For the people experiencing alcoholism, to take that drink, they wanted to rid themselves of displeasure and find the fastest route to pleasure, or from discomfort to comfort. And they found that alcohol was just the thing at the beginning. But that's the seductive ploy of alcoholism. It drags people in because it works so well initially. You know, for a while it works well, until we have to take more and more alcohol. And then what we're doing, we're developing, we're feeding an addiction, we're becoming experts in this method of escapism. But we've taught ourselves to do it by experience. And by, you know, by default, anything that we've taught ourselves to do, we can teach ourselves not to do. So let's look at addiction in a different light. We've become, let's say we've experienced addiction because we've taught ourselves to carry out a process of escape so well that we've become experts in it. We've become that good expert in it, it's now second nature. You know, for a person experiencing alcoholism to pick up a drink when they have a problem is as natural to them as the air you breathe. So again, we need to become very aware of what's going on, and that's what step 3 is all about. It's about realising that we have taught ourselves this addiction, and we just want to alleviate the discomfort and find comfort. But when we cross the abreactive threshold, we just lead ourselves, if we drink, we lead ourselves into deeper discomfort, deeper displeasure. In fact, we lead ourselves into hell, as people watching this DVD will know. It's a horrible place to be. So, the other thing is, it's commonly said, are we powerless over alcoholism? Of course we're not powerless over alcoholism. You know, the reason we feel powerless is, like I said before, that the negative psychological strategies that drive alcoholism operate at an unconscious level. So these things that we've done repeatedly, have a problem, take a drink, forget, don't care. We've done it that many times. We've habituated them. They become habit. That is the nature of addiction. And that means that every time we hit a problem, we reach for the bottom automatically. That sums up addiction. Nice and clearly, I hope. So, we're not powerless over it. Once we become aware of the mechanisms that are driving our alcoholism, we can do a lot about it. Let's not use the word, which is bandied about quite often, that we're powerless. We're not powerless over alcoholism whatsoever. Anything appertaining to ourselves, we have full power. We don't have power over other people, But anything appertaining to ourselves we have full control over, and we need make no mistake about that. Okay. So the absence of conscious control when you drink, and I explained this before, this is why I realise now that I felt like I was possessed by something, because the mechanisms driving my alcoholism, the drivers for alcoholism, operate at an unconscious level. It feels like you're not doing it yourself. It feels like something is impacting on you. Don't let, that's a scam, you know, that's wrong, that's, let's see through, you know, let's see through that, guys, and realise, yes, we do. We have every control. We have complete control over anything to do with ourselves. Okay, that brings us really to the end of the first, a summary, just a brief synopsis of the first 3 steps. And what we've done in step 1, we've admitted that we've got an alcohol habit, okay, and that the reason that we've developed this destructive habit is that we're trying to escape unresolved issues. The vicissitudes of life, basically, we're trying to escape. Any problems, let's keep it simple. Okay. We realise that alcohol initially does work. We also realise that as a species, we're a pleasure-seeking species. We'll take the path of least resistance from displeasure to pleasure. When alcohol seemingly masks our problems instantaneously by affecting the frontal lobes of our brain and our memory, we think, great, we've got the magical panacea for all of our problems. But this is a guise. This is wrong. It's a ploy. It's a seductive ploy on behalf of alcohol to draw us in, because we need more and more and more alcohol to achieve the same effects. And when we get to the quantities of alcohol that it takes, eventually what happens is that we go straight into blackout and we act uncharacteristically. We do all sorts of things that we... Bear in mind, we're like a loose cannon. All our morals and all the rules that we abide by, not only does alcohol, when it hits the front lobes, uninhibit us in ways that we don't care about our problems, we don't care about rules, regulations or anything else when we imbibe alcohol. So we might break the law, we might insult people, we don't care, we don't abide by the rules of life, because that's the way alcohol impacts on us. So then we create a new history from which we seek escape. Because when we sober up, we think, oh no, you know, what did I do last night? Where was I? Who did I insult? Whatever. Can't bear this. I know. Take a drink. That'll get rid of it all. But when we cross the abreactive threshold, it makes them problems worse. So then what we need to realise is that, well, all right, if alcoholism isn't disease and, you know, etc., what is it exactly that we're trying to escape from? And the 4 main categories are fear, futility, psychological pain and guilt. Okay, we will elaborate on that. So the first 3 steps basically are acceptance. It's to educate people, and then once the acceptance say, yes, I agree with that, then they can move on. We're going to finish for lunch now. After that, we're just going to have a look at the workbooks which you will use and see how they interact with what we've learned this morning. Thanks a lot.